bacon and eggs for breakfast, steaming roast beef for lunch, followed by a helping of apple crumble and a dollop of fresh cream.
Today we're going to look into the science of cooking, the pros and the cons of superheating food, so we can understand this scientifically for our health.
We all have our favorite food. It's a feast for the eyes, a temptation for the nose, and pure pleasure for the mouth. But it might be that what we eat has done much more to make us what we are than anyone could possibly have imagined.
Indeed, you are what you eat, and you also are what you absorb, not just what you eat. So we need to take this very, very seriously.
We know that 2.6 million years ago, our ancestors started to eat meat.
You have to be tough and clever to be able to live like this. And our ancestors certainly were.
Is meat really the problem? Human beings seem to be designed not to really eat meat, but more to live on vegetables. But is it a factor that meat is so bad, a problem with our health? Let's look more into this so that we can find out more about what we need to do.
To the discovery that something we all do every day has changed the course of human history.
Cooking is huge. I think it's arguably the biggest increase in the quality of the diet in the whole of the history of life.
Yes, cooking is very important, and there are compounds that need to be cooked, such as rice, potatoes, etc. Cooking was very important as it increases some nutrition, but then it can create some other problems.
Chew once again.
Oh, that's cool.
Bring him forward a little bit, guys. There we go. That's a good fella.
Force-feeding pythons with rat-shaped steaks.
Science has found many different things about our teeth, about cooking, about the temperature, processing enzymes, and many different things. Let's go over them so we can learn more.
And a 1 million pound stomach is recreating the wonders of our digestive system.
It isn't just what we eat, it's what we absorb, it's what we digest, what we process, what crosses the membranes that go into the bloodstream.
The researchers are trying to solve the puzzle of how our ancestors, the walking apes, became modern-day humans.
If we break down the basic ideas of the problems of cooking and etc., the health problems tell us that we definitely should avoid synthetic patented, thus unnatural chemicals. These should be avoided. The Weiss processed sugar is really, really bad. Foods boiled in oil with trans fats, very bad. Eating too much pig or other unclean foods. Eating cooked foods makes vitamin and fatty acid deficiencies. 40% of the diet should be raw.
6 million years ago, deep in the heart of Africa, ancient humans started to walk upright. Professor Travis Pickering is on their trail to discover how our species evolved.
We're going to take some time to review the development and evolution of man over the last millions of years to understand his development in terms of cooking.
We know it's a human ancestor because we have indication that it walked upright like us. But otherwise, it's very ape-like, has a relatively small brain and a large projecting face.
Then about 2.3 million years ago, there was a transformation.
The development of tools. You see, there was a development of people being able to use different instruments as tools to accomplish things in life.
We call it the handyman because it's associated with stone tools. You can see that we have brain expansion and a smaller face that's tucked up under the skull.
Finally, about 1.8 million years ago, our first truly human ancestor arrived.
The earliest ancestors were herbivore. Then they became hunter, omnivores, then shopper hunters, and then cancer patients eating too much meat.
Early human that has really modern human-like characteristics. Really big brain and indication that it was a big game hunter.
These were extraordinary evolutionary changes.
Intelligence, intellect, the ability to think started to really develop and then accelerate.
To find the answer, we need to go back 4 million years to when the forest-dwelling ape Australopithecus roamed the earth, surviving on a diet of raw fruit and vegetables. Apart from walking upright, Australopithecus was very similar to modern apes.
The digestive systems of the apes is almost identical to the human being, and yet their diet is almost no 2% protein. They don't eat meat. What they do is they eat fresh and raw fruits and vegetables.
You know what chimpanzees spend most of their time doing? They spend most of their time just chewing. And Australopithecus would undoubtedly have done the same thing. Probably more than half the day, they would have spent their time just moving their jaw up and down.
The mouth and the teeth are God's juicer. They're meant to juice properly, to break up all those things into small bits, getting it ready for the stomach. And that really needs to be extra done with raw foods.
Though our lifestyles are now more sophisticated than our ancestors, there's nothing like a bit of raw fruit and veg to put us in touch with our inner ape.
The thing that excites me most is fruit.
The Bible will tell us that the perfect food is fruits and seed products, etc. They have no karma. They're given to us, and you don't have to kill the tree to get the fruit, to get the different seed products. And these are the perfect food that supply energy, supply flavor, and supply us with all the different things that we need.
Hey, look, Jake.
It's juicy, isn't it?
Humans enjoy fruit, and even some vegetables. A very good thing, given the modern mantra of 5 a day.
A lovely core in the middle. It's chewy.
What then could be better than a back-to-basics diet of nature's finest, in the raw?
There are fruitarians, there are vegetarians. There are people who live solely on fruits and vegetables, and they don't have very many health problems. This gorilla is a vegetarian.
And that's exactly what 8 volunteers are going to do. They'll live in a West Country zoo alongside our cousins, the apes, for 2 weeks. And they'll eat like them, too.
Said, hey, honey.
These 8 volunteers are extremely used to cooked food, overcooked food. Their digestive systems are not really properly prepared for fresh and raw diet.
Well, I'm going to introduce you to the diet that our ancestors would have eaten. Inside the box is a range of fruit, vegetables and nuts. To give you an idea of is the huge range and variety of different foods that they would have eaten.
Here's a picture of a young boy near Amsterdam who his mother only fed him raw vegetables, only raw vegetables. And there was a big problem with the schools and the government trying to accept this, but he was perfectly healthy. It is possible if you tune your digestive system to it. And this child from birth was only fed that food. We're going to show you more about this later in the show.
Each volunteer is given the 5 kilos of raw fruit and vegetables they'll need to meet their daily energy requirements.
No, don't eat the leaves and the broccoli, although they are low in calories.
Their digestive systems are not properly trained or developed to be able to handle this raw food.
I've been chewing this carrot for 20 minutes. It's good, and it won't go down.
They chew long into the night.
It is definitely a false belief that you need meat, but it's hard to get people to retune their palate, their flavor, and the digestion.
The next morning,
Good morning.
the diet leaves them decidedly dissatisfied.
Sausage sandwich. Nice hill of sausage sandwich. I wouldn't mind a boiled egg. Almost. I'm a little bit disappointed with my broccoli, though.
But there's no escaping fruit and veg.
Just like we say with the wild lion and the wild human. Once you get a taste for meat, it's hard to go back.
By the third day, all is not well with their 21st century digestive systems.
I think it might be the fruit. Lots of. You gotta go, haven't you?
This is a symptom of a more serious problem.
Our experience here with the young boy and the raw food is definite and basically proves that. And you should basically make sure you turn into the end of the show to watch that.
Over the course of the week, it became clear our volunteers' bodies are so different to the Australopithecus's that they just cannot eat the necessary amount of food.
There's going to find it a struggle to get through. The volume's too much, I think.
Fruits are virtually karma-free. They don't have any karma attached. When you kill a carrot, you're actually killing a plant, killing a potato. If you're killing an animal, of course, there's karma. But if you're eating the fruit, the seed product is designed to help propagate the plant so that you can eat it and go out and shift the seeds otherwise. So now what we will see is that there is no karma attached to the seed products of
make you
fruit.
feel properly full up. Whereas I don't feel hungry, but I don't feel full up either.
Well, what we've seen here is a group of English people, and if you look at them, you're going to find out, look at them again, and they're kind of obese, because that's what meat eating does to you, as we're going to see.
By the end of the 2 weeks, the volunteers lost an average of nearly 5 kilos in weight. Though in the short term they might enjoy the weight loss.
If we look at the real stars in our society, the, quote, beautiful people, we're going to see that their diet is not heavy on the meat. These are people eating vegetarian pathways, eating vegetables, eating for nutrition. That here, let's look at what David Blaine has to say as he goes from a meat eater to a vegetable eater.
I'm 6'1" and fat. We'll say big boned. I had to drop 50 pounds in 3 months. So everything that I put into my body, I considered as medicine.
Foods can be slow poison, or foods are your best medicine. You are what you eat. You have to learn about these things to understand, because you have to use food properly and to think totally about what you're putting into your mouth.
Every bit of food was exactly what it was for its nutritional value. I ate really small, controlled portions throughout the day, and I started to really adapt my body.
We should be eating for nutrition and health, and not eating for stimulation or for flavor, etc. We should be eating for health.
The thinner I was, the longer I was able to hold my breath, and by eating so well and training so hard, my resting heart rate dropped to 38 beats per minute, which is lower than most Olympic athletes. In 4 months of training, I was able to hold my breath for over 7 minutes.
What we just saw is that he's starting to think of all food as medicine. And when he considers that food is medicine, what goes into your body should be for health, not just for stimulation, all of a sudden it changes you. And what we find is that people who have these diets full of heavy sugar and boiled oil, all this different type of things, heavy meats, if they just switch their diet within 3 to 4 weeks, their palate changes and now they start to like the new diet. This clinging to the old diet is really just a short-term thing. It takes 2 to 3 weeks before you can really readapt your palate, and then going back to the old stuff is unpalatable. But to make changes in people's diet is very difficult.
The pilot study showed that something must have happened to change our bodies since Australopithecus. But what was it?
So it's important to think food is your medicine, and recognize eating for health is very important, and then trying to get a little extra flavor as a secondary thing. There are different things in food called excitogens that excite the flavor and make us want more exciting flavors. And many of these come with meat, the different flavors that come with meat. And these type of flavors that come in from the different types of processes, they're exciting and they make us want to eat and eat more.
I like everything, really. Meat-wise.
I really like a fry-up English breakfast, yeah.
Prime butcher's bacon, nice thick slices of white bread.
Many cultures will use raw meat, and we have sushi and beefsteak tartare. But for most people, cooking helps to bring out different flavors and also helps to make a bad quality of meat a little more easier to eat.
Perfect.
Well, it's perfect if you want to be fat, diseased, and die an early death, and etc. This overeating of this extra fatty foods can really contribute. Eating dead animal flesh without good fruit and veg, without the possible fiber. You need fiber to help you get all the nutrition and to work these things through. Eating completely meat will make you sick.
Eating meat really have caused us to evolve. About 2.3 million years ago, Homo habilis, the first ancestor we think ate meat, appeared.
We know that people who lived in colder climates and started to develop fire and etc., that they would use meat because it helped to keep them warm, cooking it around the fire.
Though habilis stood no more than a meter tall, fossils show it had a bigger skull and a brain 30% larger than Australopithecus. Scientists have speculated that this upright big-brained chimpanzee evolved as a result of eating meat.
Most chimpanzees will not eat meat. And it's kind of a speculation that they have here as to whether that really is true. I would definitely argue with that proposition.
The Australopithecine brain size remained stable. Then meat eating came in, and then the brains got bigger. And that set everything off in the direction of modern humans.
The problem is, meat is much more difficult to obtain than fruit and vegetables.
Yes, we have to hunt. We have to hunt meat. We have to find ways. We have to have tools, because the human being doesn't have the legs or the ability to go out and catch lunch and dinner every day. We have to have tools in order to develop this and catch that meat.
Their remote position means they've been relatively untouched by the 21st century. In this society, there's no farming.
Yes, there are places where they don't really have any type of farming, and they go out and hunt meat, and they get some different seed products. They hunt and gather to round out their perfect diet.
Travis wants to find out how they use these weapons to hunt.
The experience of the kill. This is where the men go out and kill, and then the women are stuck at home to cook and prepare, clean, and do most of the work, where the men will spend most of the day relaxing, and then a little bit of the day actually hunting.
Within an hour.
And when they go out, the energy of the hunt will keep them trim and fit. It will provide a sharpening of their senses and their muscles and help them. Yes, the ancestors tried to find their different foods, and they had to leave the jungle and go to the plains.
Revealed that in the period leading up to the evolution of habilis, there was a massive change in the lifestyle of our ancestors.
The results tell us that our ancestors changed from forest-orientated kind of diet and environment to one which concentrated on the grassland.
These vast animals of the grassland would then need special tools such as the bow and arrow and other types of traps and snares, tools to be able to catch them, to get that meat.
I said our ancestors ate animals which ate the grasses.
But it's not just the tooth enamel which shows a change in the diet of our ancestors. It's the two clues as to what they ate.
Yes, the teeth helped us to understand what types of food, and also they developed a type of tooth that was much better at eating meat, better to be able to prepare it, even though the teeth of the human are mostly for herbs and plants.
In the natural world, animals' adaptation to their diet is clear. Herbivorous grazers, like gazelles, have large flat back teeth, useful for grinding down plants.
Carnivore teeth are designed for ripping and tearing, and they don't have a TMJ for chewing. We see herbivore teeth are like the human teeth.
Carnivores, like lions, evolved sharp teeth to seize their prey and rip their meat apart.
Humans had a type of molar that was designed mostly for plants and herbs, but then there was a change where they started to be able to eat more meat and develop different types of teeth for that.
The piece of meat processed by the more recent human ancestor has a hole virtually all the way through it, whereas the piece of meat processed by Australopithecus barely has an indentation.
The teeth of our meat-eating ancestor had become smaller and sharper, just like our own.
But that doesn't mean that they were developed into complete carnivores. They were not complete carnivores. They were still herbivores that had a little bit more ability, omnivores that could eat a little bit more meat.
Evidence reveals that the eating of meat changed our evolution forever. Our ancestors learnt to hunt, developed sharper teeth, and above all, grew bigger brains.
And also grew the ideas of killing. Murder, greed, anger, all came also with meat eating.
But if meat provided a powerful impetus for change, it was nothing compared to what happened next.
Cooking is huge. I think it's arguably the biggest increase in the quality of the diet in the whole of the history of life.
Fire provided the basic heat, and then also fire then provided flavor. Meat could be then cooked, smoked. It could be used and kept for a longer time.
The smell, the sight, the touch, and of course the taste are amongst the great pleasures of existence.
My favourite dish would be anything kind of stewy, and the one that comes to mind.
Like we said, excitogens, being able to excite the mind, drive the ideas towards flavor. We use these to market. We use these to sell different things as well.
Can cooking really have caused us to evolve?
Cooking helped us to evolve, but to evolve into what? Because along with it came an awful lot of disease, anger and hate.
Well, surely the first thing that happened in the change to a modern kind of diet was when people controlled fire and then probably just accidentally dropped food in it. And then they'd have tried that food and they'd have found it was delicious. That set us off on a whole new direction.
Lightning probably struck a cow or an animal, like we're going to see in this video. And when that happened, primitive man would have easily thought that that was a gift from God, and he tasted cooked food, and it tantalized his senses.
Because the acquisition of cooking was probably the most important increase in the quality of diet in the history of life, but certainly in the history of human evolution.
Many scientists do not agree that cooking could have been the cause of such a dramatic step.
Many scientists see that there are problems with cooking that come along with it, and sometimes there's difficulty that come along with cooking and the use of fire.
One of the major ideas is that we've evolved our large, complex brains to cope with our social environment. What we find in primate societies is not necessarily the biggest, strongest individuals which have the highest reproductive success.
Society became stronger because there's strength in numbers. We are social beings, and we truly are stronger together. Strength in numbers, society, help to shape us.
It's often the cleverest, those that can manipulate others, form coalitions, and get themselves into a high position of social standing.
Social development, intellectual development, artistic development, all of these things are evolving, and it's wrong to think that just cooking. But cooking did have a part in it. It was able to reduce bacterial growth and make food last longer.
The reasons for the major step forward in our evolution are mired in controversy. But what is certain is that about 1.8 million years ago, the first ancestor whose behavior was truly human did emerge.
And along with cooking and heat and etc., fire brought some danger, especially if it's mismanaged by some dimwits.
It's Homo erectus. It had lost the ape-like characteristics of its predecessors. Its anatomy was much like ours, and it could run as easily as we can. But crucially, its brain had grown by 20%.
Fire was nice in certain places farther north, but places in the south, the sun would be able to provide energy for cooking and for preparing meat.
Wrangham is right, and cooking was the cause of this quantum leap. It's crucial to find out when cooking started. This is a matter of some debate.
All that you need is just to get a fire going and put a nice flat, clean rock, hopefully clean rock next to it, and you can cook, eat food, smoke food, preserve food. Wonderful.
I think we first started cooking almost 2 million years ago with the origin of Homo erectus.
Cooking could possibly be 1 million years old.
Based on the direct evidence we have, I would say that we started to cook sometime in the last 800,000 years.
The change in our ancestors' teeth when they started eating meat is revealed in a new...
But it was the boiling of oil that really created much disease and danger. This is what happens if you throw water on an oil fire. It explodes. It was boiling of oil that really is responsible for many of the problems that happen with the human.
As we've seen, people have gotten into cooking. And then they got into boiling in oil because they were impatient. And that if we get the oil, which is up to about 600 degrees Fahrenheit when it's boiled, and we have the water, 212 degrees Fahrenheit, 100 degrees Celsius. And when we have food cooked in water, it's going to take a little longer. But food cooked in oil, yeah, we can cook that really fast. And it was the speed of getting the fast food culture, getting into French fries and all these other things. That's what started to drive people. And that's what they really wanted to get, that fast food. Homer Simpson, I want it now, type of thing. And when that happened, it really took our society downhill. Because when we get the nice natural fatty acids in a raw oil, all of a sudden when we cook it, it becomes a slow poison. Acrylamides are released that cause cancer. The nutritional quality of the oil is disturbed. And since fatty acids make up the cell membrane of all of our cells, oh boy, if we're taking in bad quality fatty acids through boiled oil or foods boiled in oil, we will be making bad cells. And whatever genetic problems you have, whatever the weak link in your body is, the weak link will be exposed and irritated and cause disease if we eat foods boiled in oil. So we found that there was another problem in the nutritional chain, not just cooking, but cooking boiled in oil. Up in the mountains of China, where they went to mine above the tree line, finding wood to cook was very hard, very difficult. But yet, the miner, when he came home, wanted a hot meal. He doesn't want a salad. So the women found out that if they took a little bit of the firewood and made stir fry, took the food, cooked it very, very quickly with as little oil as possible, and made a stir fry. The man was satisfied with the flavor, satisfied with the temperature, and the nutritional quality went up, the diseases went down, because they weren't overcooking their foods, overcooking the nutrients. And that little bit of nice light cooking with light oil made it healthy. Stir fry.
Professor Wrangham is not working with humans. His subjects are mice, whose normal diet is raw food. To start with, the mice are given a diet of raw yams for 4 days.
So we're feeding them this delicious raw sweet potato.
One of the most famous studies of raw versus cooked food was done by Pottinger. And we will show you entirety about that study at the end of this show.
And like any other wild animal adapted to a nice starch-rich food, we're expecting them to do very well.
In science, you can often do a study and interpret it in different ways. So I think you need to watch the entire show and Pottinger's study to know more.
Then, for 4 days, they are given cooked yams to eat. The impact on their bodies is startling and immediate.
Yes, cooked food really has a major impact. It makes you fatter, and it leads to disease.
These mice have got activity wheels, which enable us to monitor how far they go every day. And they can go kilometers every day. By the time we totted up how many rotations of the wheel had been conducted by each mouse, then the ones that ate the cooked food went significantly further.
It does free up energy, but it doesn't supply complete nutrition. Some of the nutrition is lost in the cooking process, especially fatty acids.
Than the ones that ate the raw food. They just had more energy and traveled further.
Although they used up so much more energy, by the end of the 4 days, the mice which ate the cooked food did not lose weight.
We're going to hear from a man who now will tell us about the Pottinger case. We will show you more about the Pottinger study at the end of the show, but watch now.
Hello, my name is John Rose, and in this video I'd like to take a closer look at the Pottinger cat study. Now, Dr. Francis Pottinger did a really interesting study back in the 1930s. In a 10-year period of time, he went through 900 cats. Had 2 groups of them, fed them the same food except half of them, he let them eat it the way they'd eat it in nature, and the other half he made them eat it the way we eat it. He cooked it for them. Wasn't doing those cats any favors. The results are nothing but amazing. He showed that the cats that ate the altered food had the same types of problems that we had. The illnesses, the ill behaviors, and on and on and on. And I'm not going to go into any details at this time about this study because I have before in other videos. And I know a lot of people are going to argue, saying, okay, now look, we know that cats have an essential need for taurine, and it's only a non-essential need for ours, and it's destroyed by cooking, so therefore we can't extrapolate the Pottinger cat study with all the other studies, and that's the point of this video. Bullshit! We sure the hell can. In fact, we can do this study with every animal on this planet. I can guarantee you one thing. You take every animal, every species, feed them the food they're supposed to eat raw, cook it for them, and cooking's not going to do them any better. It's going to make them sick and worse. And we're no exception. It boggles my mind that we can actually think that's doing something good. But yet I guarantee you, there is not one animal on this planet that's going to do better when you alter their food. Just like the cats. They're going to have the same problems. And it doesn't matter if it's the taurine that's being destroyed or whatever. It's destroying the food. And when you stop destroying your food, you know what happens, don't you? You're in for a treat.
In fact, they got fatter.
So here we're seeing that mice that eat their food cooked are getting more energy than mice that eat their same food raw. The same thing should have applied to our ancestors when they ate their plant food cooked rather than raw.
When cooking depletes nutrients and etc., then it creates problems. Now, here in the Pottinger study, over 900 cats over 10 years, and they were fed a variety of different things, from raw foods and cooked foods. Different types of groups were used. And when they got done, there was complete evidence. And when you got up to about 80% cooked food, 70-80% cooked food, you got disease, all different types of diseases. That's where they started to see parasites abound. They started to see cancer. They started to see degenerative disease. You're going to see more about this entire study when you could see it at the end of this show.
Why would cooking food have given us more energy? After all, the process of heating food does not increase the number of calories in it.
There are many foods that need to be cooked. Now let's look at some of the science of what cooking does to certain of the starchy foods.
Dr. Kathy Groves investigates what happens to food at the microscopic level when it's cooked. She places a piece of raw potato under a microscope and starts to heat it.
Now we're going to see just what this cooking does and how it frees up some energy in the food.
Well, what we can see here is that we have starch grains which are raw, they're not cooked, and as we heat them, they're swelling up hugely, and the molecules are breaking up inside the starch grains, so allowing the starch to be released from the grain, aiding digestion later.
This is why nutrition and ability of the potato is improved by cooking. So is rice. There are many different factors, many different foods in the environment that we cannot eat raw, that need to be cooked, exposed to heat to help break them down. Then cooking becomes our pre-digestion. And what happens is we're going to see that not all fruit and veg are this way, but some are. Some actually really need cooking.
Cooking is a pre-digestion process, and overall it changes the structure of the food. It loosens the cells, it softens them, it allows them to be broken up in the mouth much more easily so that they can then be digested later on.
Cooking gave us energy, but cooking, at the other hand, destroyed some of the fatty acids, which left people fatty acid deficiency, creating states of hunger and creating other problems. And we have to understand that this desire then drives people into wanting those fatty foods more and more as they get fatty acid deficient from the cooking, which destroys the fatty acids.
Easy access to calories has had a fundamental effect in changing the course of human evolution, according to Professor Wrangham.
The discovery of cooking gave our ancestors enormously more energy, and you know, we don't know yet how much.
Created energy, but it also took away from the digestive process and robbed it of its purity.
Enough to have a huge evolutionary impact on survival and reproduction.
The biggest problem then was sugar added to the diet. Sugar was started in Persia back about 500 BC, where they found this saccharin, they called it. That's where we get the word saccharin. And when we take this type of food has an incredible ability to make the blood sugar go up and then down. It's what we call the high glycemic food. If we take the high glycemic foods like white sugar, another one is the white flour, the white potato, corn, these type of things, and make the blood sugar go up and then down. This stretches the different parts of the body, mostly the pancreas. And we now find that there's a war on sugar because of this. We have to take these high glycemic foods out of our diet and bring them down, but they dominate the diet because by producing a hyperglycemia, when you take it in, this produces a heightened feeling. And this heightened feeling makes you want to eat more, makes you feel a little better. And you don't remember that 10, 15 minutes later you're followed by a hypoglycemia. You associate the food with the instant gratification of hyper, and that stretches the pancreas and stretches all the other parts and creates a host of different diseases accompanied by high glycemic foods. So we have to continue this war against white sugar. And what we need is we need to get into fructose, levulose, which is a left-handed sugar. This fructose, natural fruit sugars, have less of the dextrose in it. So they have a more mellow effect on the blood sugar, and the blood sugar does not go up and down. The blood sugar is more mellow. This produces a stabilization of the immune system, of the mental nervous system, and a host of other things, and does not have the problems associated with the high glycemic foods. By switching people from their sugars from white processed dextrose right-hand revolving sugar into a levulose left-hand fruit sugars, we will be able to increase all of the quality of the health of their body.
They use up more energy digesting cooked or raw meat. Snakes, being mainly a head and a stomach, make good subjects for this experiment. They eat their prey whole and stay still for up to a week.
So our scientist friend is going to study a group of snakes. Two groups of snakes, actually. One group that's going to get cooked food, and another is going to get uncooked raw food. Then we're going to measure the metabolism to see what type of energy it takes to digest cooked versus
The
raw.
only energy expended is in digesting their food.
We're trying to see if we can find any difference in the cost of digestion between a cooked meal and a raw meal.
We expect to see that it takes more energy to digest a raw meal, and less energy to digest the cooked.
So when we feed the python a ground cooked steak, what we find is that the energy expended on digestion assimilation has decreased by 24% compared to the intact raw steak.
So what we thought came true. It takes more energy to digest raw, thereby making you less fat.
It shows that eating cooked food reduces by 1/4 the energy required to carry out the process of digestion.
And that this ability that it takes more energy to digest raw means that cooked food makes you more fat. By destroying also the nutrients, it actually makes you more hungry. So we're going to see that even though it makes it more flavorful and reduces some different pathogens, cooked food isn't so good.
Made our guts smaller. Once we cooked our food, we didn't need big guts. And big guts were a disadvantage. They're costly in terms of energy. So those individuals that were born with small guts were able to save energy and therefore have more babies and survive better.
But then comes in the big giant problem. Boiling food in oil. Boiling food in oil, because we want the food cooked quicker, boiling in water at 100 degrees Celsius wasn't good enough. We needed 300 degrees Celsius boiling in oil. And when they did this, it produces acrylamides, which cause cancer. It completely destroys nutrition. It takes up to a temperature where most vitamins are destroyed. And we have a big problem. And most of the diseases now are going to come from cooking foods in oil, boiled oil. The oil itself is not bad, but when you boil it, it becomes bad. We don't go into the shop and find sources of unboiled oil. Boiled oil is always, always bad. The trans fats are a big problem in disease, and we definitely have found that boiling food in oil is something that is really remarkably disease-causing. We have to, as a society, understand to get back to using water, boiling, and other different factors, and be able to restore harmony. Boiling foods in oil, French fries, and all these other compounds create big problems for the human digestion. So, cooking and heating meat is not so bad, but boiling anything in oil is a problem. All these different fried foods create lots of different types of diseases that we can stop as our society.
Vlees en zuivel is niet goed voor onze gezondheid.
Now let's look at one woman's fight to be able to preserve her right to feed her son raw foods. Because this is what she's been doing since his birth. And governments, the schools, fought against her dramatically.
You are.
I can't show you the complete
cornerstone of this
video
whole thing.
because of
You
copyright
actually,
issues.
if you're strong
But
enough
I
to
really
handle
want
it,
you to take a look at this
your
raw
example
if you can.
is
And you'll
powerful enough
see
to change
that
the whole
indeed
direction of this whole
the boy is
country.
healthy,
And
strong,
by doing that, it
intelligent.
actually can change the whole
We
direction
don't really
of
need
every
to have
country.
cooked foods. And they don't
And
need to
that's
struggle
what you have
so
the power to
against
do.
them. Well, the boy grows up healthy, intelligent, wise, and actually trim, fit, and no sense of any disease. So we do know that eating raw foods and only raw foods is indeed not a problem. If you watch the whole movie, things turn out very well for them. Now, what we've been able to see here is that our health problems with cooking come from synthetic patented unnatural chemicals, white processed sugar, foods boiled in oil with many trans fats, eating too much pig or other unclean foods, and a host of other different problems that are creating disease. So cooked food is good, but we need to have at least 40% of our food needs to be fresh and raw. Obesity and disease are definitely a dietary problem. And we need to understand that for good health we need 5 servings of fruits and vegetables every day, and fresh and raw. Now let's look at the study about Pottinger.
Tuberculosis was linked to
I think it's
adrenal
important
gland
to show you the
deficiencies.
complete
He
Pottinger
took
cat
on the
study.
task of standardizing adrenal extracts by using adrenalectomized cats. These were the steps required to standardize the biological extracts for later use with his tuberculosis patients. The cats chosen for the study were apparently in perfect health. They were kept in open-air pens with a yard 4 feet wide, 7 feet high, and 12 feet long. They were fed cooked meat scraps from the sanitarium, which included internal organ meats and bones, along with some additional raw milk and cod liver oil. According to all known standards, this diet provided an optimal amount of nutrients. The cats seemed healthy. The adrenalectomy technique had been proven appropriate. Nevertheless, the study suffered from an unexplainably high mortality rate. Then came that uncalculated twist of events. For some reason, many more cats were provided for the study than could ever have been fed using leftover cooked meat scraps from the sanitarium. So raw meat scraps from a nearby meatpacking plant replaced the cooked meat in the diets of certain cats. Within a very short period of time, the operative mortality rate of that group dropped significantly. The raw meat-fed animals began to survive the adrenalectomy extremely well, and they continued on in a superior quality of health. Pottinger had unexpectedly glimpsed a new facet of fundamental nutrition, and he was compelled to respond with a series of studies that would span the next 10 years of his medical career. To begin the study, a population of animals was selected which Pottinger aptly dubbed run-of-the-pen cats. He was not interested in physical perfection. His major concern was that his cats represent a normal sampling of animals, with the exception that cats with obvious deformities or disease were excluded. Needless to say, when people from the nearby community heard of the study, more cats were mysteriously abandoned on the Pottinger doorstep than could ever be used in the experiment. Pottinger was intrigued by what he termed heat labile factors, or put as an experimental question, he asked, does the cooking process somehow render food nutritionally deficient, causing eventual physiological degeneration? A basic diet was designed consisting of raw meat, viscera, bones, a small amount of raw milk, and cod liver oil. Each day, this basic diet accounted for 1/3 of the total dietary intake of the animals. The remaining 2/3 of the diet was the dimension of experimental manipulation. One group of cats received raw meat or cooked meat along with the basic diet. The other group of cats were given raw milk, pasteurized milk, evaporated milk, or sweetened condensed milk. Each cat's daily diet then consisted of 1/3 of the basic diet, plus 2/3 of the prepared food which was under study. And once assigned to a specific group, the animal's diet was held constant. Although there were 2 different studies, one focusing on milk and the other on meat, the results of both studies were nearly identical. Over the next 10-year period, Pottenger observed and recorded numerous physiological changes in the experimental animals and their offspring. First, you will observe the raw milk animals. They move about the pen with a great deal of agility and coordination. Notice the sheen to the fur and the normal sexual interest displayed toward the male in the next pen. As would be expected, they land on their feet when thrown in the air. The pasteurized milk-fed cats, shown here, move about the pen in a manner quite different from the raw milk cats. The cat in the foreground actually developed arthritis during the experiment. They are lethargic, much like animals in a zoo. When thrown a short distance, these animals show a slightly impaired sense of coordination. Dental deterioration was also common. Note the abscesses above the molars, the reddish cast to the gums, and the soft gingiva. With evaporated milk, there was even greater deterioration. When the study was begun, this cat was better developed than any animal shown thus far. The sweetened condensed milk-fed cats not only had their milk heat processed, but there was the addition of sugar. They are nervous animals. Again, there is marked deterioration in coordination and dental abnormalities. Notice particularly the abscesses and the purple tone to the membrane of the mouth. For a further comparison, here is another example of normal development. Notice the firm gingiva, the normal coloring tones, the beautiful broad mouth, the full jaw with obvious power. This animal happens to be a male, but the comparison is nonetheless valid. Here is another illustrative comparison. The raw milk female gets in 20 or 30 licks for every one of the pasteurized milk female, then leaps away in disgust. These were all first-generation animals, born of theoretically healthy parents, and who themselves were healthy at the beginning of the study. Disturbing as these observations might be, the impaired balance, the lack of energy, the dental deterioration, some of the most significant findings emerged as Pottenger extended his study down to the second and third generations. Almost immediately, Pottenger noticed that animals fed the raw meat diet for 2 generations appeared larger than the same generation of cooked meat cats. At 16 weeks, this second-generation raw meat cat weighs 2,000 grams, while the second-generation cooked meat animal only comes up to 1,600 grams. Compare the black kitten with this raw meat kitten. The sheen, the sparkle of the eyes, the well-developed face. Nutritional studies often look at skeletal development as a rather vital index of dietary sufficiency. This is a raw meat animal with the full, round face. A later examination of the skull showed a firmly developed zygomatic arch. The frontal sinuses were complete, and calcium content of the bones throughout the body ranged from 12 to 17% by weight. The skulls of adult cats with a long ancestry of raw food diets are surprisingly constant. Here we find the development of a second-generation cooked meat animal. The head has begun to flatten and is actually smaller than the comparable raw meat cat. The skull shows the major reasons for this change. The zygomatic arch is not completed. The nasal development is somewhat irregular, and the calcium content has fallen to 10%. Third-generation cooked meat animals show the most remarkable skeletal change. The skull is considerably smaller. It is flat with pointed features. The skull shows a poorly developed zygomatic arch. The bones are paper-thin and soft like sponge rubber. The frontal sinuses had developed in a peculiar fashion, and the calcium content of the bones had fallen to a low 3% by weight. Activity level is another index of interest. In this pen, there is an obvious difference in activity level between the raw meat animals and the cooked meat animals. One of these cooked meat kittens actually had a broken back resulting from a failure in development. Moving into the third generation of experimental animals, the degeneration was even more pronounced. The smaller animal is a cooked meat kitten and is actually the oldest of the three. The kitten on the left is a second-generation raw meat cat, and the one on the right is a second-generation cooked meat cat. Here is a second-generation cooked meat mother with her third-generation offspring. She has a male body configuration. Her offspring developed nasal and ocular allergies. From this same litter came an asthmatic kitten, purportedly the first to be reported in the research literature. Again, there is marked dental deterioration, abscesses, poor coloring, and gingival irritation. Pronounced exhaustion was a typical observation among the third generation of cooked meat kittens, as well as impaired coordination. This third-generation cooked meat kitten had over 24 fractures, resulting from a failure in development. And finally, this little third-generation cooked meat kitten was unable to release its claws from the hardware cloth, and probably would have died had not the assistant taken it down. At this juncture in the study, a most interesting development emerged. The cooked meat cats were unable to successfully reproduce after the third generation. Most were void of sexual interests, and those that had attempted to mate could only produce stillborn litters. On the other hand, the raw meat animals continued to reproduce healthy offspring generation after generation. The notion that specific nutritional factors in food may be destroyed by heat processing is obviously not far-fetched. Physiological deterioration down the generations is quite graphic, and according to Pottenger, the process was found to be reversible only with great difficulty. He did demonstrate that the animals could make considerable gains towards physiological normalcy, but it took 4 generations of a raw food diet before the animals regained their native structure and original level of well-being. An interesting sidelight came 6 months after the experiment's conclusion, when volunteer weeds emerged in the fallow pens. In the raw milk pens, the plants flourished. In the pasteurized milk pens, the growth was somewhat less hardy. Plants in the evaporated milk pens struggled, and the sweetened condensed milk pen speaks for itself. At a later date, navy beans were planted in the respective pens, with parallel results. What are we to make of these numerous observations? I suppose one could easily slip into pessimism when translating these findings into terms of human deficiency. However, there are certain redeeming features that should be examined. From the beginning, the dietary intake of each animal was carefully controlled. Man is rarely restricted to such a high degree because he is omnivorous. Nevertheless, the changes discovered in the Pottenger cats are comparable to many like changes in human beings. The historical work of Dr. Weston A. Price corroborates the Pottenger study by charting the graphic degeneration of primitive tribesmen as they moved from their traditions and dietary customs to the civilized world. And if it is true with human beings, as it is with cats, that nutritionally caused deterioration is passed down the generations, a sobering challenge stands before us. Throughout this study, Pottenger stressed the high degree of dietary control he imposed on his laboratory animals. This is quite an accurate accounting of the facts, with the exception of the one cooked meat cat that somehow got away. Although she did undergo obvious degeneration during her captivity, later she was able to experience a partial physiological recovery while living in the wild. And any fitting epilogue would point out that she compensated in a rather fine manner and carried on in the genteel tradition of her feline ancestry.
The planet.
So what we've seen here is just how cooking and food preparation has affected the health of our people, of our society. And if we can recognize to eat a little less meat, eat more vegetables, don't boil things in oil, don't get those white sugar products, try to have less of the high glycemic index foods and more of the stabilized foods, we're going to see that the diet of the, quote, beautiful people can be the diet of all of us, and that all of our health, vitality, energy, and beauty will all come out. We need to be able to take these things into effect and recognize, as we understand, that we need to eat a little less meat. Meat is not the real culprit here. But if you only eat meat and potatoes and high glycemic foods, high cholesterol foods, disease is just waiting for you. You are what you eat.
Mm.